Okay, my name's Edward Paul Donegan, and I'm going to be talking about McMartin Preschool. And I want to read something on borderline personality disorder before I go into the abuse of children that was testing them for borderline personality disorder at a very early age. And something about Manchurian Candidate, the movie in 1962. How do you tell at a very early age how children are developing? Even before 2 years old, when people begin speaking, and even before some of the later developmental things. How can you test very early on the very innate reactivity that's part of the volatility of borderline personality disorder? And at a very young age, I was found to have borderline personality disorder, what it's called now. Back then it was called minimal brain dysfunction, ADHD, and a couple other things mixed together. But I want to read something right now, and it talks about, let's see here. So it says, showing results for what I'd queried, borderline personality disorder and outburst. Intense and sometimes inappropriate rage is a characteristic of borderline personality disorder, BPD. An individual with this mental health condition has difficulty regulating their emotions or returning to their baseline, which can include frustration-induced anger and even rage blackouts. And in fact, that's one of the issues of borderline personality disorder. And according to Jen Moore, that's one of the things that are played upon when people are trying to get under your skin. And she's talking about the history of borderline personality disorder and how it's being tested for and abused in children, even adults who have it, is that people like myself who are writing books about the history of the CIA and the research of this very rare disease, not that rare, it's actually pretty common, but it's only now really beginning to be understood as a disease pathology, a disease symptom group, being understood first in terms of a collection of now more identified co-occurring sets of behavioral expressions, really beginning to look at the organic nature of it, the nature versus nurture, a lot of other things like that. But so, really as they're getting a better definition of it, they're better able to match meaning into that definition. What does it really mean once you are defined as having it? And so, again, let me read that again. The borderline personality can snap at any time. Intense and sometimes inappropriate rage is a characteristic of borderline personality disorder. An individual with this mental health condition has difficulty regulating their emotions and returning to their baseline, which can include frustration, induced anger, and even rage blackouts. What I'm asserting, and Jen Moore was asserting, is that the use of abuse of people with borderline personality disorder, either at an early age or later age, trying to play with that disease and get outburst out of a person, is one of the things that is being done to kind of silence people. I'm writing a book about my history of borderline personality disorder, how it tied into the history of the McMartin School that Ted Gunderson will talk about in Franklin, Nebraska. And he's an FBI agent who was in that area. What he did is he did a scientific report how children were being tested by putting them under really abusive and just disgusting sets of circumstances. And the children would either react to it, in a fairly normal way, or they would just go really crazy. And so the question was, when do people really fly off the handle? When they were in toxic and noxious situations and they're being exposed to those situations. Witches flying through the room on, kind of things, and children like, And one kid goes, throws his rattle at the thing, and it's over, and the kids go on and play Monopoly or something like that. Another kid's chasing around for the next 3 days. Like, okay, which kid is like the one that mama wants to adopt? And the one who's still there 3 days later chasing it is like, okay, that guy's gotten a little off the handle. So that's what they're really trying to do, is test for these kind of conditions. By the same token, they can try to piss somebody off. And this is what Jen Moore was talking about, what they call gang stalks or terror stalks, and dealing with that darkness within. The ability to kind of harass a person's life in really abusive, stalking ways and get reactions out of a person. She called it the biological decomposition system, that's kind of rubbing salt into a wound to get somebody into a fight they don't want to be in, and harassing people to get them into fights and creating hostile environments. It's how you taunt and toy with that stuff. If you're a journalist or writing an autobiography like I am, and they're kind of hoping to get you into a fight or something like that. And so the illegal things that the FBI does is really the only things the FBI does. And one of the illegal things they do is kind of stalk people and piss them off and get them in fights and bully them. And that way kind of harass, a person's life. And I'm undergoing that harassment right now. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jen Moore, who's talking about my family history and my mother and myself and what that family history was, going all the way back into World War I, and how children had come into the USA with backgrounds that were like hidden identities, children that were like adoptees and not tied to the families they came from for various reasons, tied to World War I and II, and how these children were in orphanages or adoptees or tested as very early age to find out that they have this condition and what the secret history of this kind of study was back in the days of eugenics and things like that. So I'm going to introduce a little bit video from Jen Moore, some from William Colby, and another guy, Ted Gunderson. All of these people in John DeCamp were all a bunch of CIA people tied to that history. And they were concerned if the history come out, people might die, including themselves. And Ted Gunderson was sure William Colby was assassinated over the Franklin, Nebraska case, and which also is the McMartin case. They're together. And Ted Gunderson had written the introduction to the Nebraska case after having worked on the McMartin case and seen that they were really the same thing with the same CIA group. And so I'm going to be introducing their videos, my history of McMartin School, my history of borderline personality disorder. But first I want to let you hear them and them talking about what the secret OSS CIA history was. What it really boils down to is they were out of wedlock people. My mother was one of them. She had a hidden identity. And she was adopted as an orphan as a child from North Carolina. And that story is going to become critical later.
So I'm posting this video just because I'm going to attach the interview number 3 and 4 that I've done now regarding, the first 2 interviews were kind of starting in World War I and moving into World War II, OSS to the CIA, different players that were involved, the Dulles brothers, Hitler, obviously, Aleister Crowley, MI6, MI5, how the OSS became the CIA, the Vatican's involvement, the indoctrination that occurred, the different experiments that were done, how MKUltra was brought together under several different kind of philosophies or mythologies, I guess you could say. Some of it is really hard to listen to, but it's the truth and it needs to be told because it's still happening. And so as these interviews go along, I move it into the United States and Canada in particular. I mean, it's a lot of other places, but United States and Canada really was infiltrated through black budgets by the CIA and went from OSS into CIA. Vatican was involved in that, and Operation Paperclip, and how these Nazi scientists, including Hitler and Mengele and Himmler and all these kind of the worst characters of all, were secretly moved into Argentina and South America. And then some of them were even brought up into the United States, and they were given new identities. They were brought into universities, hospital programs, various secret sites, black budget sites, where the experimentation continued on all kinds of things and all kinds of Americans, especially small children. And I'm going to lead into things like the Kinsey studies, if anyone has looked into that, Masters and Johnson, how they're all tied together, some of the places that are still in operation as of today that I'm aware of. But these 2 interviews specifically start to bring into the politics of the United States of America, at least since World War II, the different players involved. A lot of these players, I call them players, or politicians, or businessmen, or senators, or whatever title they might have. There's some of them that don't want their identities known, their real identities or their real histories known. And I'm not going to name names at this point, except you could do some deduction, use your deduction skills, and kind of think about whose identities might have been hidden recently. even years and years and decades ago, but recently, really. And so these interviews start talking about that and how that came about and why there's such a mystery and why there's so many sealed records and some of the information that I am in possession of to begin to peel back the layers of this onion so the American people can fully understand where we are today, why we are here today, and who these people really are. Because this country is our country, the American people's country. We are in charge of the government. They don't get to hide from us. So it's time for their exposure, and I'm going to be part of that. So you can listen to interviews 3 and 4, and it gets into some pretty gnarly details. But there's truth there, and I've got court cases and documents to back it up, personal eyewitnesses, and you name it. This is the story of a whistleblower or whistleblowers in general. Yes, it is dangerous. I accept that. At the same time, I refuse to be silent anymore. And so I'm going to carry on releasing this information.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Granada Forum. On November 11th, 2010, tonight we have an incredible guest, Ted Gunderson, a former bureau chief for the FBI in the early 80s. So without any further ado, let's give this gentleman a warm round of applause.
Thanks a lot. I feel like old home week. I've been here so many times. Can I raise this?
You don't get older.
Huh?
You don't get older.
I just had my 82nd birthday 2 days ago. All right. Let me raise this up a little bit here. Anyway, thanks for the invitation, Wendy. You're a special lady. She deserves a round of applause for what she's done. Boy. Well, you know, I heard a very inspiring speech at Chuck's 9/11 Truth Conference here, and I said, I've got to go see Wendy and get some information that I've developed that I've never presented before. And get it out to the public. And that was a great conference, Chuck.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Before I begin, let me just mention that I'm going to do a series of 4 or 5 lectures. If I can't do it here, I'll do it with Dennis in the back room of his camp. I call it Iron City, because he's got a bunch of old cars out there. And but this is the first. And the reason I'm so inspired by your speakers that you had there, Chuck, is because there's a lot of information that needs to be given to the public. And I'm going to do the best I can. Now, there's those people who think there is no conspiracy. So there is a conspiracy. And my lectures are going to be entitled Conspiracy Reality. Okay, and I'm going to prove to you tonight that there is a conspiracy, and hope you will pick this DVD up and pass it out to your friends. I had a young college fellow here from up north. Where are you? Was it Jason? Was that your name?
Josh.
Yeah. Josh. Yeah, and he said he's having trouble convincing his fellow students about what's going on. So with this is all over, you be sure to get a copy of this and make copies and pass that out on campus, okay? I have to go back to 1951. I graduated from the University of Nebraska in 1950. By the way, one of my colleagues there was Johnny Carson, and I knew Johnny Carson, yeah. And it was right after World War II. My brother had entered the Air Force, and he over Germany, his bomber went down, he was killed, and he had graduated from the University of Iowa, by the way. So I'm Midwest born and bred, basically. But when I first got out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, which I think happens very regularly. So I took a job with Hormel Meatpacking Company at selling hams. And my kids have always accused me of being a ham all along, so it worked out real well. They used to call me the FBI ham. And I'm driving down Grand River in Detroit, Michigan, and I heard about a friend of mine, Dick Kinsey, who had applied for the FBI and was accepted. And he was my college friend at the university. And I said, if Kinsey can make it, I can make it. And I just kept on driving downtown and applied for the job with the FBI. The only trouble was you had to be 25, and I was 22. So the fellow interviewed me, I'll never forget, his name is Zimmerman. He said, although you're only 22, why don't you write a letter to J. Edgar Hoover and tell him you look older? So I wrote a letter to J. Edgar Hoover, personal letter. I said, Dear Mr. Hoover, although I'm only 22, I look like I'm 28. Actually, I look like I was 19, okay? As you can tell, I am young looking for my age. I always have been. But you know what? 6 weeks later, I was in Quantico, Virginia, shooting gun, going to class, learning about collection and preservation of evidence, federal rules of procedure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I had to take a test first. I had to pass a physical. And that was the beginning of an absolutely fabulous career. The FBI in my day, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, up to about 1980, was a great organization. I'm sorry to say that they have deteriorated considerably, and I'll go into that with details in a few minutes. But in my career, after I left training school, I went to Mobile, Alabama, and I'd never been south of the Mason-Dixon line, and I'm thinking, I'm going to the end of the world. But it was a great experience. And then from Mobile, Alabama, I was transferred to a small town, Union Springs, Alabama, a town of 2,500, just 50 miles west of Phoenix City. If you know anything about Phoenix City, Alabama, it was corrupt, prostitutes in and out, stolen cars. It was right next to Fort Benning, being Columbus, Ohio, or Columbus, Georgia. And so it was a real experience breaking in there. I worked general criminal, theft of interstate shipment, interstate transportation, stolen motor vehicle. We had an extortion case and so on and so forth. And from Union Springs, I went up to Knoxville, Tennessee, worked atomic energy cases. From Knoxville, I went up to New York City and worked counter-espionage. We were very active exposing and identifying espionage agents for the Soviet bloc countries, the Russians and the Chinese, of course. And from there, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was there for about 5 years. And William C. Sullivan, who was number 2 man in the FBI, actually, there was Hoover and his associate, and then Bill was next, third person, came out to Los Alamos, New Mexico, for a lecture, and I drove him up to Los Alamos, and he took a shine to me. He said, Ted, you need to come back to headquarters. I went back to headquarters, worked organized crime and racketeering for 2.5 years when Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were in office. I had occasion to meet with Bobby Kennedy. And then when Jack was murdered by the New World Order boys, I was taken over to White House Special Inquiry, and I worked White House matters when Johnson was there. And on one occasion, later on when I was inspector, I'll come back to the White House and tell you what happened there. It's kind of interesting. And from there, I went up to New Haven, Connecticut. And I'd never been east of the Mississippi, so other than Alabama and Tennessee and so forth, and in New York and Washington, D.C., but I'd really, in the New England area, it's a very beautiful state, very nice area, great assignment. And while I was there, the Black Panthers were extremely active. They were taking over college administration buildings. They were running around the country with gun belts on and weapons and so on and so forth. They're really, a really true revolutionary group. And I was in charge of anti-terrorism. And we did a job on the Black Panthers. And after the Panthers were down out and no longer active, I had a call from William C. Sullivan. And Bill told me I attribute the downfall of the Black Panther Party directly to you, your squad, and the New Haven Police Department. And from New Haven, I went on down to Philadelphia. I was number 2 man in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, I was assistant special agent in charge. And probably the most exciting case I'd ever worked in the FBI occurred July 12, 1972, Philadelphia International Airport. 2 terrorists had taken over an airplane, National Airlines Flight 496. And I negotiated with them for 2.5 hours under another airplane with the 3 jets engines running, and successfully for the release of 119 passengers. And I'm in the process now. I ran across my transcript of my negotiation with the terrorists. By the way, after we successfully rescued the 119 passengers, the plane, I let them take off in another plane, the original plane, and I had the second plane. One plane had run out of fuel and so on and so forth. So we let him go on, and they ran out of gas over Texas, and we negotiated down there for some 9 hours, and they finally gave up. One was sentenced to 60 years, the other one was sentenced to 40 years. But my transcript, I just ran across it recently. My negotiation, that's going to be on my website very soon, I think maybe within a month or so. But from Philadelphia, I went into FBI headquarters as a inspector, and then out later down to Memphis. I was in charge of the FBI Memphis division, and then in charge of the FBI Dallas division, and then the best assignment in the FBI, very frankly, I was in charge of the FBI Los Angeles division. Now, I had over 700 personnel under my command, a budget of $22.5 million, and we covered most of Southern California, 16 offices, and it was a great pleasure to be here. I did mostly public relations work. I had a staff of 24 supervisors, 3 other special agents in charge. I was a senior special agent in charge. And then on March the 30th of 1979, I retired. I had Pat Brown there, former governor. I had Jerry Brown there. I had Red Buttons. And I had the chief of police, the chief of the sheriff. I had the head of the highway patrol. It was who's who in the Los Angeles area. Now, I mention that because if you go on the internet, you're going to see derogatory information about how I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremonies in the federal building, okay? And that's just plain disinformation by government operatives. Movement in this country. It is big, it is huge, it is dangerous, very dangerous. But that case is what really woke me up as to what was going on. I've always been a red, white, blue guy, a mother, apple pie, Chevrolet, and that sort of thing. And beg your pardon, Dennis? Did you say something? No. Oh, okay. And this case said, in this instance, Dr. McDonald was framed. And the reason he was framed is because the government, mainly the military, were flying drugs in plastic bags in the body cavities of dead GIs out of Southeast Asia into the military bases here in the United States. And Lena told me that her satanic cult group distributed the drugs up and down the East Coast, and the higher-ups in the drug operation did not want this to be known, of course, that they were involved in the murder, and so they basically framed Dr. McDonald. I'm telling you right now, the man is absolutely innocent. He's been in jail for like 30 years. And we have an appeal before the Fourth Circuit at this time. I'm going to go into one of my lectures, I'm going to go into great detail about this case. I can probably talk about it for about probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. But very briefly, what we have in the appeal before the Fourth Circuit is my confessions that I took from Helena Stokely. By the way, she was murdered in January 1983. And also, under one of the fingernail of one of the young ladies, one of the little girls, 2.5 and 5.5, skin, not skin, but a hair with the root was recovered, and it did not belong to anybody in the McDonald family. Also, Colette, the wife, she had skin under her fingernail, and that skin was scraped from under the fingernails and given to William Ivory, the CID Army investigator, and it disappeared. So there have been a whole series of cover-ups on it. Case is a fascinating case. I really, really hope that we can get him out this time. But anyway, that's basically what happened. That gets me off the ground, so to speak. There is a conspiracy. This lecture is dedicated to all the corrupt politicians, the judges that allow guilty people to go to jail deliberately, and my second webmaster is a victim of this. Not only the politicians, and the judges, but the bureaucrats who investigate these matters. CIA, FBI, military intelligence. The real, most serious culprits of all are the military intelligence. NSA, they're keeping track of all of our phone calls, of where we are every minute of the day. But when our forefathers established the three branches of the government, executive, legislative, and judicial branch, they had no idea that down the road, years later, there would be a fourth branch. And I call the fourth branch the covert, rogue government criminal enterprise. These people, this element of our society, is involved in the drugs, the illegal drugs, kidnapping children, and so on and so forth. And since I got out of the Bureau, I have done everything I can to expose it, and I'm exposing it today. Now, one of the programs by the government, and I'm going to go into detail as to how the government operates, how this rogue element operates in the country. I'm sorry, excuse me. And one of the thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the techniques that's used is called COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO is short for Counterintelligence Program. I know all about COINTELPRO. I was one of the individuals in the FBI who actively administered it against the Black Panthers. It's very effective. But here recently, the Southern Poverty Law Center wrote me a letter after I had cancer, by the way. It was discovered last October 28th, about a year ago. And that had an operation April the 6th. I'm glad to report right now I think I'm rid of the cancer. I don't have it anymore. But I had a letter from one of the intelligence officers at Southern Poverty Law Center. Is there anybody that does not know about the Southern Poverty Law Center? Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, as far as I'm concerned, is a second-person individual organization that's involved with this covert government criminal enterprise. Absolutely no question about it. They listed, and this is, I'm explaining the COINTELPRO program, how it works how they worked it against me. They listed the 40 false patriot anti-government leaders. They also listed the most dangerous patriots in America recently. I'm proud to announce that I made both lists. They also described me as a leading conspiracy monger. Does anybody know what a monger looks like? You're looking at him, I guess. Okay. The Anti-Defamation League, another organization, as far as I'm concerned, that's a spokesperson for this rogue, covert government criminal enterprise. They describe me as an extremist speaker And they say that I pose as a threat to the country. Do I look like I'm a threat to anybody? No, of course not. Beg your pardon? Okay. They claim I will likely become a target of U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. Now, I don't know what that means, but if I'm going to be on a list or a target of the Department of Justice, so be it. So I will still continue to do what I'm doing. I'd like to emphasize that I'm not an anti-government monger, conspiracy theorist. I pulled the details out of this. I don't want to go into all the detail. It's too much. I'm not an anti-government person. I'm an anti-corruptionist. I love my country, and I will continue, as long as I'm alive, to continue to expose this evil element that's permeated throughout our society. I like football, baseball. I like to have a beer once in a while. I'm as normal as any of the rest of you out here, okay? And I'm not anti-government. Again, I'm anti-corruptionist. That's the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the Anti-Defamation League, as I said, are fronts for the New World Order. And I remember after Oklahoma City, everyone was clamoring to find out what happened. By the way, I have proved without any doubt that the government was involved in Oklahoma City. No question about it. Absolutely. I'm going to have a whole lecture just on the terrorist movement of these 4 lectures. But I can tell you right now, the car bomb, the truck bomb, was not a fertilizer bomb, okay? They used fertilizer bombs to blow up tree stumps in the backyard of the farmers near the barn, right? They don't blow half a building away. Now, I found out through a scientific magazine and through one of my sources that the bomb was what we call an electro-hydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. For short, I'll call it a barometric bomb. This particular bomb was developed by Hercules Manufacturing in Silicon Valley, California. It was tested in 1982, and I was with a group of individuals in Palm Springs, spook-type individuals, good spook type, not bad spook type, okay? When it was tested, we sat in the hotel room waiting for the results. It was so powerful that one of the technicians was killed and others were injured. President Reagan, I think he was president at that time, put a classification on it and put it on the shelf and said, you know, don't speak about this anymore. That's it. It was highly classified. But one of the persons in the hotel, or in the hotel room, was one of the developers of that bomb. He was a CIA scientist for some 20 years. That's why I knew about it. I obtained the number for this bomb, and the contract number for this bomb, and I sent it to Picatinny Arsenal, wrote a letter to him, and I said, send me a copy of the contract. This is all public information, by the way. And they wrote back and they said, there's no such contract. No such contract. I talked to an inside investigator who represented the McVeigh team. He told me there were at least 11 other people involved. I have copies of the TV shows that afternoon of the Oklahoma City bombing, and every TV station in Oklahoma City announced that they were bringing unexploded bombs out of the building. And one of them made the statement, now we're going to know where these bombs came from. One of them has U.S. Army stenciled on the side of it. That was on the air. I have the copies of that. Wow, I was right. And there's a lot more to the story than that. But anyway, my report, 222-some pages, is on this CD. Last time I was here, I passed out a CD to everybody that wanted one. And I've got 6,500 pages on that CD. I got 52 reports: Oklahoma City, 911, the car bombing of '93, and so on and so forth. The kidnapping by the Finders, the CIA child kidnapping organization, and it goes on and on and on. I'm making this available. I make this available to the public. And I did. The last time I was here, I passed out 25 or 30 of them. In fact, Dennis makes copies for me, because I want people to take my work and get it out and educate. But I've had so many people planted on me, government operatives. I feel like I'm the Garden of Eden, to be honest with you. That's right. For example, a fellow named Stu Webb. This is all part of their master plan to discredit me, so people like you won't listen to me. So a fellow named Stu Webb came to me. I ran for political office back in the 90s, and I lived in Las Vegas at that time. I need a place to stay for 4 days. Well, I take patriots in all the time, so I come on over and stay in my place. He stayed for 7 months. I gave him, and I fed him. I've even bought him a suit. I let him use my car, gasoline, the whole thing. I got to quit doing that, folks, because it gets me in trouble every time. But anyway, I finally told Stu, I said, I got my granddaughter coming to stay with me. You're going to have to get out of that third bedroom. I had an elderly lady living in the second bedroom who was from Ireland and a cripple, and I'd run into her in my travels, and I took her in too, and she ended up being an invalid. But anyway, Stu Webb left when I was out of town, stole 35 copies of Thanks for the Memories, which was Bryce Taylor's book. You remember that book? Bryce Taylor was the presidential model. And last time I checked the internet, Thanks for the Memory was selling on the internet for like $110. He stole 35 copies that I had. He stole my research, 8 or 10 boxes of my research. And it goes on and on and on. But Stu Webb when he walked out the door, when the next time I saw him, he said, I'm going to destroy you and the patriot community. And this is he's the one that says I was kicked out of the FBI for practicing satanic ceremony in the federal building. So much for Stu Webb. He's been discredited, so forget about him. Jim Kloberg, another person who was planted on me. I ran for a political office in Las Vegas in '96. And Kloberg was my campaign manager. And when the campaign was over, I was selling my DVDs and books and everything else to try to finance the campaign. Very expensive, by the way. And those of you who think it's easy to run for politics, it's not. It just, to register in the primary across the country, if you're running for president, costs you more than $100,000, okay? But anyway, after the campaign was over, I received a letter. I lost. I ran in I re-registered from Republican to Democrat so I could go to these conferences and take on Bill Clinton. Okay, he was president at that time and rerunning. And anyway, this lady wrote me a letter and she said, I never received my DVD. Where is it? And I said, well, send me a copy of your check and send me the flyer. And I found out that Kloberg made up his own flyer with another name, Gunderson for President or some name like that, had his own bank account, and the money was coming into his own post office box, okay, and he was putting the money in his pocket. Clear-cut election violation of the federal laws. And I immediately reported it to the U.S. Attorney and the FBI in Las Vegas. Nothing ever happened. I found out later that Kloberg was an FBI informant who'd been planted on me. Now the latest, again, now we're talking about disinformation specialists. The latest incident was really costly. A woman named Virginia McCullough, and she's from up here in Northern California, and she's been bashing me for years, and she finally made a big mistake. In 2005, I had to leave Las Vegas and go to Nebraska because I was being poisoned. I was sitting in my office. Actually, I had an office in my home, a condo. And I realized I wasn't thinking straight, and I was foggy, and I couldn't remember some things. And I'm saying, there's something wrong with me. I went down and took a test, and I found out I had arsenic and cyanide in me. And as a result of that, by the way, I have high blood pressure, and I'll be on high blood pressure medicine the rest of my life. But I said to my associate, Clarence Malcolm, who's my webmaster now, my first webmaster was murdered, the second one was set up and framed on child molestation charges. Chris Jones didn't do it. So I said to Malcolm, by the way, does anybody want to volunteer to be fourth webmaster? Here you go. See me after the, okay? So I said to Malcolm, we got to get out of here. So within 2 weeks, I called John DeCamp. I'm sure you folks know the name John DeCamp. He's a great man, Lincoln, Nebraska attorney, and he and I worked on the Franklin cover-up case together. I called John DeCamp. And I said, John, I got a problem. I got to get out of here. And he said, well, come on back to my hometown, Claytonia, Nebraska. I'll guarantee there's not a person in this room that's ever heard of Claytonia, Nebraska. It's 196 people. It's about 5 blocks long and 3 blocks wide. And 196 people. They have a post office, a bar, and a bank. And that's it. That's their business section. So John said, come on back. I got a house I'll rent to you. So Clarence and I and his wife and his 8-year-old daughter, stepdaughter at that time, moved from Las Vegas to Claytonia, Nebraska. And John was quite surprised. He said, come on back. And 2 weeks later, I got a van in front of his house with furniture. I said, where do I go, John? And he made fun of that because he didn't know if I was going to come back or not. But John rented me one of his houses. And I'm going to tell you how much I rented it for. It's 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, 1/3 of an acre land, $550 a month. Doesn't sound like LA, does it? No. So anyway, so there I am in Claytonia, Nebraska. And Malcolm and I and his wife and Linda and the daughter, stepdaughter, are, pumping out the DVDs, furnishing information when we can, educating people when we can, and so forth. All of a sudden, knock, knock, knock. Open the door, here's the police officer. We have received information. You are holding a child hostage here. We want to see the child. And I said, and Malcolm said, do you have documents, court documents, papers? No, out the door. And it was a female police officer. She slammed the door. She was really upset about that because we challenged her. So Malcolm says, we got to get out of here. So we moved 20 miles down the road overnight, registered the house in Beatrice, which is where we moved to, in his wife's maiden name, and about a week later, knock, knock, knock. And here is another police officer, only this time, Beatrice police officer. We have information that you are holding a child hostage here. We want to see the child. Court documents? No, out the door, okay? So I immediately go down and talk to the district attorney. Randy Rittenauer is his name. And I say, I'm telling Randy, what's this all about? He says, well, I'm receiving emails from some woman in California about this. I said, well, how would she know what we have going here in Claytonia, Nebraska? Well, we got to check it out. I said, no. I said, the woman's is Virginia McCullough. Isn't that right? And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no. He just went like this and nodded his head up and down. So as a result of that, Malcolm left Beatrice overnight and goes to Texas. And then from Texas, he ended up having surveillances on him like we've all had, those of us in the limelight, so to speak. And I sent him and the daughter and his wife to Panama to get them out of harm's way. And he's been down there. Now, what that did to me financially is mind-boggling. I have not been able to get my DVDs out for almost a year, because this happened a year ago now, actually. And so I've got a bunch of back orders I'm in the process of putting together now. Malcolm, in the meantime, has moved back to the States. He's living in Pennsylvania, and we're going to be able to crank it out. But that's Virginia McCullough. Okay, another government operative. So no sooner did I neutralize Virginia McCullough, because I went public with this. It's on my website about Virginia McCullough. Then up pops Dr. Leonard Horowitz. Does anybody know that name? And I'm shocked, because Leonard Horowitz is telling me that in this 12-page document, I have a copy of it here, he's telling me that Ted Gunderson and others are serving Michael Aquino, former head of the Temple of Satan, or excuse me, the Church of Satan, and now the head of the Temple of Set, that I'm serving him? What does that mean? And also goes on and talks about me being involved in these various government activities, and I'm a CIA operative, and I'm also an FBI operative. And do you think I look like an FBI operative or CIA operative? No, of course not. As a matter of fact, I've been kicked out of the Ex-Agent Society because of the criticism that I've directed at the FBI. I want to make it very clear, there's a lot of good people in the FBI and the CIA. However, it's the people at the top, okay, that I have a problem with. Anyway, this 12-page document goes on and on and on, blasting me, and similar to the information that the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League said. I responded to Len Horowitz, and it's on the internet. I don't have a copy of it with me. And basically, I just told him, I said, you just exposed yourself, because you're accusing me of being a government operative and working for the government, and we're criticizing the government at the same time, so I'll be accepted in certain circles, and now you've come in with this. I neutralized Virginia McCullough, now I've got to deal with Leonard Horowitz. Leonard Horowitz is a government operative, absolutely no question. If you read this 12-page document, you will see. These are the tactics that they use. They criticize the government, some of the people that they pulled out of the woodwork in order that they would be accepted in patriot circles. And then these people criticize people like me. They think they can be accepted, and it discredits me. Now, is this COINTELPRO program and this disinformation program on the internet, has it affected my life? You bet it has. Because I'm not being invited to these big conferences anymore where I could give a lecture in front of 300, 400, 500 people. This is exactly what the rogue, covert, criminal government enterprise wants. That's why they do it. So what's the reward for me? Now I'm going to tell you what's happened to me in the last 30 years. And I'm not telling you this because I'm looking for pity or I'm looking for sympathy or anything. These are facts. Okay? Now, Will Rogers said, what do you say? If it's true, what do you say? Anybody remember what he said?
He never met a man who didn't lie.
Huh?
No, I'm sorry.
Anyway, I forget what Will Rogers said. I'll tell you what happened in the next lecture. Anyway, what's happened to me, I've had 3 contracts on my life. Okay? I've had 2 other probable contracts. And I will give you just a little detail about the contracts that were put on me so that you will understand it's not just talk right off the top of my head. I might mention that in 2 of these instances, through divine intervention, I did not go home. I lived in 500 South Kelton in Westwood. This was in the 1980s, or mid-1980s. And I had a door, I lived in a triplex, and my door opened up onto the street. The landlady who lived behind me on the second floor Came home one morning, 1:30 in the morning, and here's two guys sitting across from my front door in a car. And one of them gets out and walks over to her, do you know where Ted Gunderson lives? And I told her, if anybody ever asks about me, you don't know me. And of course she said no, she didn't know. Well, she told me that the next day. And I made some phone calls, and I learned that there was a contract on me. And fortunately, I do have some good sources, and it's kept me alive. But what it really has kept me alive is on that particular night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a friend's house at the last minute. So I say it's through divine intervention that I didn't go home on that particular night. So one of my contacts says, I used to work with, and he gave me his name, who is known as the cocaine king of the West Coast. Let me go talk to him. Let's go talk to him. So there were 4 of us, and we went to talk to the, quote, cocaine king of the West Coast. And we go in, the fellow comes to the door, lets us in. We had an appointment, it was on a Monday. He escorts us into the parlor, and then he takes us from the parlor into another room, and we sit down, and a little dog comes in about this big, and smelled all of us, and sat down at my feet, and went to sleep. And the, quote, cocaine king of the West Coast comes in, looks at the 4 of us. My dog likes you, I like you. And I'm saying, I'm sure happy about that. To myself, of course. So he tells the other 3 to scat. And I had been hired before this by a fellow named Robert Ferrante, who came out of his office one night, about midnight, and a gunman steps out of the bushes with a ski mask on, fires 13 shots, I think, at him, hits him 5 times, he lived, and Robert Ferrante hired me to find out who tried to kill him. Well, earlier that evening, that he came out of his office at 12:30 or so, his accountant came out, walked across the parking lot around 6:30, and there was a car parked with the back of the car against the building, and the fellow was just sitting there. Now, at the time of the shooting, a car similar to that was parked there and pulled out with the motor running, and there was another car in another direction, opposite of him, that was with his motor running, and the gunman ran and jumped in the other car, and then this first car took off. Well, if you know anything about contract killings, they will always have 2 cars, so the gunman can get in one or the other depending on the circumstances. So I took the accountant aside, put him under hypnosis. By the way, if you do hypnosis for artist conception, it's much more effective. And it's unbelievable the detail that you'll come up with. I took the accountant aside. We did an artist conception of the fellow sitting in the parking lot at 6:30 that evening. And very good artist conception. I hired a former police officer who specialized in artist conceptions. So when I knocked on the door, the cocaine king of the West Coast, who do you think answers the door? The guy in the artist conception, right? But I'm saying, well, there's 4 of us. I don't think they're going to do away with all 4 of us. So that's just the fellow that let us in the parlor, and let the dog come in. So the cocaine of the West Coast tells the other 3 to scat out of the room, and sits down with me, and he says, how many children do you have? Well, I know what the message meant. You know, if you screw up, your kids' lives are in danger. And I told him. Then he pulls this artist conception out. He had a copy of the artist conception. And he said, who gave this to you? And I said, if you're going to do harm to him, I'm not going to tell you. I'll take the heat myself. And he was kind of miffed about that. He said, I didn't say I was going to do anything. So I said, okay, promise you won't, and I'll tell you. So I told him the story about the accountant and so on and so forth. And he said, okay. He said, let me make a phone call. I'll be right back. So he left the room, and He came back, he says, "You're right. You got a hit on you. I can take care of one of them. I can't take care of the other one." I said, "I got 2 hits on me?" "Yeah." So I said, "Well, take care of the one and I'll see what I can do about the other one." And so he left and came back again. He said, "Okay, I made a phone call. Don't go home or to your office until Friday." This was Monday. So I lived in a hotel room that whole week with a gun under my pillow, and I didn't move. I paid cash for the room. That was before you had to furnish identification. And it's kind of interesting because every time somebody walked down the hall in the middle of the night, I would wake up. And it was after that that I, by the way, that hit was taken off, thanks to him. He called me later and asked me to do a favor about 6 months later, and I won't need to go into that. But the point of this story is divine intervention. I didn't go home that night. A friend of mine said, "Stay with me this night, and we'll go from there." And so anyway, I ended up I had some friends drive me to Dallas. I remember I slept in the back of the car, in the back seat of the car, for like 21 hours. That's how long it took to drive to Dallas, because I hadn't had any sleep in a week. And then while I was over there, I'm saying to myself, I got to get rid of this other hit. This is all New World Order stuff. This is all Illuminati. Okay, they put hits out on people all the time. Don't bat an eye. So I'm over there, and I get a call from a fellow in Los Angeles. "Come over, I want to talk to you." And this particular person had some pretty good contacts because he knew about my situation. He knew I had 2 hits put on me at the same time. And long story short, this particular person was able to take the second hit off of me. That was just one. On another occasion, 1986, I said to myself, I've had enough cops and robbers in my life. I'm getting out, and I'm going to go in business for myself. Divine intervention, again. The good Lord wasn't going to let me get out of this work that I'm doing. And I invested every dime I had, and I lost it all. And so I had to go back in to private investigation work. I didn't have to because I had a pretty good retirement check. So this fellow, I was living with my business partner and his wife and kid. My business partner went overseas, went to Argentina, I think it was. And he was gone for a while. And then my daughter had a road trip, and I house sat for her. And on that particular night, an individual, and I found out later his name was Bill Mincer, known as Charles Manson II, came into the house about 11 o'clock. She was on the 3rd floor, it was a tri-level, and heard him coming in. And the dog went bananas. She closed the door, went to the telephone to make a phone call. Didn't work because the phone down in the kitchen had been taken off the hook. And she sat there and waited it out, got her gun out. He didn't come upstairs. Again, I made some phone calls, and I didn't go home that night because when my daughter came back from her road trip, I was staying at her house, and we decided to watch a movie at the last minute. So, divine intervention. Absolutely no question about it. And the other 2 probables I don't need to go into them, but there was a fellow who was hanging around my P.O. box for quite a while, and I'd have to send somebody else in to pick up my mail. This is all New World Order, as I said a few moments ago. This is all what they do. They kill people. And Kucinich, not Kucinich, but I forget the congressman, huh? No, there's a congressman from Ohio, I think it's Kucinich. Yeah, he has asked for an inquiry into the CIA hit teams that are operating in this country today. Okay, he's asked for an inquiry, but nobody's paying any attention to him. That's just one. I can't tell you how many illegal burglaries, illegal entries I've had into my home. It's like Grand Central Station. They're in and out of there, and it's unbelievable. I took a trip when I was in Nebraska. I was gone for about 3 weeks. I came back, and I had my research, 500 boxes of research over a period of years, stored in the third bedroom. They helped themselves to 200 boxes of my research. Okay? They're in and out of my car on a regular basis. I can, right here in LA, I parked down, I remember parking downtown, and I came back, and they do this all the time, turn the direction signal on. I start the car up, and the direction signal's on. I had my car stolen twice. I had my brake lines cut. I have had 2 windows shot out when I was standing nearby. They were intimidating me. They weren't real bullets, fortunately. They were air bullets. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to intimidate me. I've been poisoned in Las Vegas. I was poisoned. And what they did there, the only way they could have poisoned me is they had the condominium next to me, and they were pumping poison in through the air ducts. I had my right front tire come off I was driving between Omaha and Lincoln, 60 miles, 75 miles an hour. The right front tire came off. Highway Patrol came, looked at it. It was John DeCamp's pickup truck, by the way. I had gone from Lincoln to Omaha to talk to a source. And the only way they would know that was by tapping John's telephones. And I found out, the highway patrolman looked at it, he says, hey, your lug nuts have been loosened. And they tried to loosen the lug nuts on the left front tire, but somebody must have interrupted them because they weren't successful there. They wanted both tires to come off at the same time. My mail's been opened, diverted, and intercepted. My phone was cut off once. And I called the phone company. I said, hey, you discontinued my phone. Why? And they said, well, we sent you a bill. You didn't pay it. I said, well, where'd you send it? They sent it to a fictitious address in Florida. Never heard of it. I've had mail disappear. People written to me, and I've never received it. Surveillances are almost a daily occurrence. And what I do is I do U-turns on them and get around behind them and chase them. And they try to intimidate me. Look, I was in a gun battle in Memphis, Tennessee at the airport. If they're going to intimidate me, they're not going to intimidate me. I'm not afraid of them. I've dealt with terrorists when I was in the FBI. And I remember when back in about 90 or 91, they put a dirt bag out, just parked across the street, maybe 4 or 5 cars up. And I would see them there, and I'd put on my gun, go out and get in my car, drive by 3 miles an hour, stare them down, do a U-turn, 3 miles an hour, stare them down. Then I'd park in behind them. And they couldn't get out of there fast enough. One of them ran a red light. Then I chased another one and cornered him on the street, blocked him, and I reached under my front seat like I was going for a piece, and his eyes got big as saucers. And I was on a street that went up the hill and down. It was one way. I went up and down and parked at the bottom of the hill, and then he started coming up, and I was watching the rearview mirror. I could see the top of the car, and when he saw me, he stopped and backed up the wrong way in a one-way street. By the way, I've got some pretty good license numbers, a lot of license numbers that I'm saving. My business has been sabotaged, Virginia McCullough. I've had telephone taps. I sued GTE back in the 80s, got an out-of-court settlement. I've had threatening phone calls. I came back from a trip once, and I got up in the morning. I was looking for a file on a desk, and I had a phone call, 827. The male voice said, did you find your file? Click. They had a hidden camera in my house. I was attempted gas on the freeway. They gassed my webmaster, Clarence Malcolm. I've interrupted 2 attempts to steal my car. I've had flat tires. In one instance, I had 3 nails in the same tire. That's a little more than a coincidence, I think. I've had my guns stolen. I had 4 guns stolen out of my house in Nebraska. I sleep with a gun under my pillow. I got a combat Magnum. And one day, just a couple of years ago, I check it regularly. I checked it and somebody had come in and taken the bullets out of it. So if they came in on me, I was going to have to throw the gun at them, I guess. Cameras, they've taken pictures of me. I've been, my webmaster was hit with uranium-235. I know for a fact I've had a trash cover on me. My computer has been sabotaged. I've been expelled from the Ex-Agent Society. I've talked about my plans, the disinformation program, McCullough, Horowitz, and so forth. Those are just the life of a person who dares to take them on. Also, I might mention that in the early 1980s, I had 4 investigations on me. I know because I applied through the Freedom of Information Act. And one of the reports came, they sent me back. It wasn't anything significant, a couple of pages on a report. And they said, in the interest of, quote, national security, we can't give you the full file. But it's kind of interesting because one of the reports at the end said that they consider me armed and dangerous. Okay, well, I am armed and dangerous with knowledge, right? Thanks. Thank you, sir. Pam Fawcett. They put a girl on me, Pam Fawcett. DEA and the FBI. I dealt with her on the phone for 6 months. She was in Modesto. Tried to set me up on a drug deal. And she called me one day and said, I need to talk to you. She came down. I met her at the time, I think it was Hughes Market or Ralph's Market across from this place on Ventura Boulevard, the Sportsman's Lodge. And she told me that the whole story about how they had tried to set me up through her and drugs through her. And I said, Pam, why are you coming over to my side now? I had the names of the FBI agent and the DEA agents who dealt with her. She said, and I was trying to help her on the phone. I tried to help her with her 14-year-old kid. He got in trouble down in Florida. And she said, I woke up the other morning and I realized you're the only honest son of a bitch I've talked to in 6 months. Those were her exact words. Pam took a polygraph, passed it, and last time I talked to her, she said there was a hit on her. Oh, here's Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich, that was it. This is in American Free Press, April the 6th, 2009. Dennis calls for probe of U.S. hit team. So, what do we have? Well, we have the NSA and the FBI have teamed up with AT&T and Verizon to spy on U.S. citizens. This is all documented. President Bush reauthorized a secret program more than 30 times to spy on Americans since September 11th, 2001. U.S. government, NSA, has tapped its entire internet system. FBI can hear everything you say, even when cell phones are off. The code word for this program is Quantico. All payphones at Grand Central Station in New York are tapped. The Bush administration began spying on Americans 7 months prior to 9/11. The President authorized our intelligence agencies to database every citizen in the U.S. 7 months prior to September 11. 2 of my very closest friends, very frankly, have disappeared. I don't know what's happened to them. We have thousands of guillotines that were shipped in here from Japan. In Atlanta, Georgia, we have 500,000 caskets that hold 40 bodies in each casket. We have 1,000 internment camps around the country. We have sensors on the major highways every quarter of a mile. I talked to one of the installers right here in California.
What was that?
Sensors. But that keeps track of your car. Sensors, yeah. Did I pronounce it right or wrong? That's right? Okay. Yeah, I went to school in Nebraska, so I have an excuse sometimes, okay? We have the Patriot Act. I don't tell you about the Patriot Act. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that. Okay? The Constitution violations and the amendments that they've done away with through the Patriot Act are, got them here someplace. All of them.